I think we disproportionately stop whites too much and minorities too little.
So, political commentator and podcaster and friend of the show, Benjamin Dixon, uncovered some leaked audio from 2015 of Michael Bloomberg bragging about targeting minorities in his stop and frisk program while he was mayor of New York City. Now, there are two parts to this story, because first I'm going to break down, I'm going to show you what Michael Bloomberg said, show you another example of Michael Bloomberg saying a similar thing. But the other half of this is how CNN reacted to this story by not going after Michael Bloomberg, but by going after Benjamin Dixon. So first, let me show you the audio here. This was played during one of Ben Dixon's podcasts, which I'll link to below the video as well, so you can hear his whole podcast. He has a great show. But let me just show you this clip of what Michael Bloomberg said back in 2015.
95% of your murderers and murder victims fit one MO. You can just take the description, Xerox it, and pass it out to all the cops. They are male, minorities, 15 to 25. That's true in New York. It's true in virtually every city. And that's where the real crime is. You've got to get the guns out of the hands of the people that get killed. So you want to spend the money, put a lot of cops in the street, put those cops where the crime is, which means in minority neighborhoods. So it's one of the unintended consequences is people say, oh my God, you are arresting kids for marijuana. They're all minorities. Yes, that's true. Why? Because we put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why do we do it? Because that's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them up against the wall and frisk them. And then they say, oh, I don't want that. I don't want to get caught, so they don't bring the gun. They still have a gun, but they leave it at home.
All right. Now, before I get to this clip, you got to listen to Ben Dixon's take on this. And he also goes into other things that Michael Bloomberg has said, including how taxing the poor is good because it controls them. And also how Michael Bloomberg endorsed George Bush in 2004. In addition to a whole other bunch of stuff where, I mean, if you have anybody in your life that supports Michael Bloomberg because they've been tricked by his advertisements on television, you have to play the Ben Dixon episode for them. It's about 30 minutes long. Again, I'll link to it below the video. After you watch this, go check it out and share it with your friends and family. But look what Michael Bloomberg says here. So essentially he's saying, he's admitting to, arresting minorities more. And he thinks it's a good thing because that's where the crime is. But then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where you keep arresting minorities and they keep making up the most arrests. And you could say, well, look, they do the most crime, but they're doing the most crime because you're arresting them more. So they're not actually doing the most crime. I mean, I'm going to get to stats later about how marijuana use is equal from with whites and blacks, except black people are arrested for it 4 times more. And in New York City, it's a lot more than 4 times of white people. But also, let's get to, this is, like, when I first heard this clip, before it became a huge story, I just thought, yeah, this is what Michael Bloomberg thinks because he has said this before. Like, this isn't shocking. So there is more video, lots more evidence of Michael Bloomberg saying similar things about his stop and frisk program. So here is just another one about, and this one arguably is even worse, about how he thinks that potentially whites were targeted too much.
They just keep saying, oh, it's a disproportionate percentage of a particular ethnic group. That may be, but it's not a disproportionate percentage of those who witnesses and victims describe as committing the murder. In that case, incidentally, I think we disproportionately stop whites too much and minorities too little.
I mean, how do you come back from this? If any other Democratic candidate said this, they would have to get out of the race immediately. This is absurd. And even if you want to go into Michael Bloomberg's worldview and think, well, that's what the data shows, the data doesn't even show that. So quoting, look at this graph, quoting the New York Civil Liberties Union here, they say, what one would not expect and what raises further concerns about racial bias in the NYPD's stop and frisk program is that blacks and Latinos were more likely to be frisked, and among those frisked were far less likely to be found with the weapon. Of blacks and Latinos who were stopped, 54.1% were frisked, while 39.6% of whites who were stopped were frisked. Yet, A weapon was found on only 1.9% of blacks and Latinos frisked, as compared to a weapon being found on 3.3% of whites frisked. These figures strongly indicate that race was a factor in officer decisions to frisk a person. And Michael Bloomberg wouldn't deny it because he's saying right here, in fact, we stopped whites too much and minorities not enough. This is racism 101. How this man is running for the Democratic nomination blows my mind. Now, let's get to the pot arrest I was discussing earlier. So on average, black people, this is a well-known stat, black people on average are arrested 4 times the rate of white people for marijuana possession, despite both blacks and whites smoking it at the same rate, clearly showing you a racial bias in the way that black people are arrested for a certain crime compared to white people. But that's on average. In New York City, it's even worse. So this is a piece from The Gothamist from 2009. Pot arrests soar under Bloomberg, white tokers mostly exempt. It's no shocker that the vast majority of marijuana arrests in New York City ensnare blacks and Latinos. But what's really incredible is how high the number of pot arrests have risen during Michael Bloomberg's first 2 terms. The lowest level marijuana arrests rose 50% since Giuliani's time, according to a recent study by Harry Levine, a sociology professor at Queens College. Last year, the NYPD made more low-level pot arrests than in the 12 years of Mayor Koch, plus the 4 years of Mayor Dinkins, plus the first 2 years of Mayor Giuliani combined. And all this happened under the mayor who famously told New York, quote, "You bet I did smoke pot and I enjoyed it." Last year, the city made 40,300 low-level pot arrests. Of these, 87% were of blacks or Latinos, according to Professor Levine's report. The NYPD justifies the spike in misdemeanor pot busts as part of the old broken windows approach to law enforcement. Bloomberg's chief criminal justice aide tells The Times, this continued focus on low-level offending has been part of the city's effective crime reduction strategy, which has resulted in a 35% decrease in crime since 2001. The possession of less than an ounce of marijuana was decriminalized in New York in the 70s. Smoking it or having it open to public view is a misdemeanor. So under Michael Bloomberg, not only did arrests over pot increase massively, increase a lot more than under Mayor Giuliani and other conservatives and other Republicans, but he targeted minority communities, targeted black people, targeted Latinos for smoking pot, just as he admitted to doing himself. And this is the guy running for the Democratic nomination. He should be torn to threads, to shreds or to threads in every single cable news piece or every single article about him. All of this should be brought up in addition to his endorsement of George Bush in 2004, in addition to him stopping the increase in the minimum wage in New York City. You can go on and on and on about Michael Bloomberg and his horrible record, and especially his horrible treatment of minorities. Yet, this is barely being touched on. Now, CNN, the cable news station, supposed to be on your side. They're supposed to care about the facts. They really care about the facts. So I'm sure they brought this story up and were really angry that Michael Bloomberg did this and covered it objectively. Watch how CNN covered this.
Put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. Yes, that's true. Why do we do it? Because that's where all the crime is. And the way you get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them.
So here's the thing. Important context here. We don't have the full tape. So this is obviously snippets that have been released. The podcaster and the writer that released this sound is clearly a Bernie supporter. If you look at his Twitter feed, he's very anti-Bloomberg. He is promoting a hashtag, Bloomberg is a racist. We don't know how he got the sound to begin with. So lots of questions are being asked, especially on the timing of this. As you noted in your introduction, a poll yesterday shows Bloomberg rising in the polls and particularly strong support in the African-American community. He polled at 22%, just behind Joe Biden at 27%. So the timing here and the mission here all calling into question.
But we also know, right, Christina, that Bloomberg is going to face continued questions about the stop and frisk policy.
I don't know whether to laugh, cry, or yell. But I'm probably going to yell. This is unbelievable. Here they play this tape of Michael Bloomberg, and their first reaction isn't, oh my God, can you believe he said this? It's, well, the guy that shared it supports Bernie Sanders, so should we really even listen to it at all? Let's just completely ignore it and move on. And then she talks about Benjamin Dixon's Twitter feed. Oh, we'll get to Christina's Twitter feed in a second here, don't you worry. In fact, so you would think what I thought, maybe, when you first saw this clip. So Christina Alessi, that was who the person making the comments about Bloomberg there. I thought she was a Bloomberg surrogate. I thought, oh, well, obviously she's going to try and spin this because she supports Bloomberg. She's a surrogate for him. No. Christina Alessi is a business and politics correspondent for CNN. She's not on the Bloomberg campaign, at least not officially. She works for CNN as a correspondent, a politics correspondent for CNN. But guess what? She did work for Bloomberg. Of course she worked for Bloomberg, because why else would you be saying this insane crap unless you know the man and he's paid you and maybe is still paying you? So if you go to the Bloomberg website and search her name, you see many articles that she wrote for him back in the day. She was also a host on Bloomberg TV, as you can see here. But the support for Bloomberg doesn't stop there, because if you check her Twitter account, she is tweeting a lot about Bloomberg for somebody that's supposed to be some, neutral commentator here about the race. Look at some of her recent tweets. Bloomberg is now one step closer to qualifying for the debate stage, hitting 15% in the latest Quinnipiac poll. The Bloomberg campaign weighs in on tonight's delay, #Iowa caucuses. Bloomberg says the campaign will have 800 staff in California by the end of next week. And she even reported on what Bloomberg's Instagram account said following the Oscars. After the Oscars, Mike Bloomberg's campaign took to Instagram with the Donalds, awarding Trump for blah, 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 blah. Like, this is next level. Like, this is truly, totally shameless. How they have this woman on and don't say that she worked for Bloomberg, don't say that she clearly still supports Bloomberg, and have her on to spin what Bloomberg said into an attack on Benjamin Dixon. It's unbelievable. I don't understand, if you know any of this context, if you just watch, just hear this story, let alone every other time CNN is lying about this primary race on television. But just this story alone, if you just see this, how they reacted to this, how can you possibly trust anything any CNN host says about this race? And then they wonder, why are people talking about fake news? Why don't people trust cable news like CNN and MSNBC? It's because of crap like this. It's because you keep lying to people and think you're getting away with it. I mean, this is why cable news hosts are always complaining about Twitter. I mean, if you've watched any cable news, you have seen some cable news hosts complain about Twitter because they get attacked on Twitter. I shouldn't just say attacked. They get exposed for being the liars that they are. That's why they hate Twitter. Because people on Twitter are actually informed. We do some research. We look into who you are. We look into what you've said. And in this case, they have on somebody who worked for Michael Bloomberg, may still be getting paid by Michael Bloomberg, and is supposed to be a neutral arbiter in this discussion on the race, and Michael Bloomberg being a racist. Unbelievable.